Hey everyone, and welcome back. You ready to explore some cities that are like living maps of the cosmos?
I'm ready.
Awesome. Today we're diving into temple towns in India, Varanasi, Madurai, and Ujjain.
Excellent choices.
We've got a whole stack of history books and architecture texts all about how religion and urban planning were basically best buds in ancient India.
Yeah, it's fascinating how they didn't just plop a temple down and call it a day. They really thought about how to design the entire city around these sacred spaces.
So we're not just talking about pretty buildings, we're talking about an entirely different way of thinking about urban design. Like, what if a city could be a reflection of the universe?
Exactly. And that's where this concept of sacred geometry comes in.
Okay, pause for a sec. Sacred geometry. I'm picturing like mystical triangles with laser beams. Break it down for us.
All right, so basically, sacred geometry is this idea that certain shapes and spatial arrangements hold spiritual meaning. Take Humayun's tomb in Delhi. It's got this nine-bay layout inspired by Timurid traditions.
Okay, I'm seeing a pattern here. 9 bays, 9 planets. Coincidence.
Not at all. It's all symbolic. The nine bays represent the 8 levels of paradise plus the earthly realm.
Whoa. So they're not just picking numbers out of a hat. They're packing meaning into every corner of the building.
Exactly. And that thinking extends beyond individual structures. Think about the Charbagh concept.
Charbagh. Okay, you got to translate for us non-Persian speakers.
Sure. Charbagh means 4 gardens. It's a layout that symbolizes paradise and pops up all over the place, from gardens to entire city plans. You can even see it at the Taj Mahal.
So it's this idea that paradise isn't some far-off place, but something you can experience right here, woven into the fabric of life.
Exactly.
I like it. Okay, so we've got this concept of sacred geometry, of weaving spiritual meaning into the physical world. How does it play out in our 3 temple towns?
Each city brings its own unique flavor to these principles. Let's start with Varanasi, built along the sacred Ganges River.
Varanasi, the city of light. I've seen pictures of those ghats, those steps leading down to the river. They're visually stunning.
Oh, absolutely. And they're not just for looks. Those ghats are deeply intertwined with Hindu beliefs about life, death, and purification. People bathe in the Ganges to wash away their sins and seek spiritual liberation.
It's like a physical and spiritual cleansing all in one.
Exactly. And all around the Ghats, you'll find temples, tons of them, dedicated to Shiva, Vishnu, and a whole host of other deities. It's a major pilgrimage destination.
So it's not just about the river itself, it's how the entire city is physically and spiritually oriented around it.
Precisely. Imagine the Ganges as the central axis and all these narrow streets and alleyways branching off like a labyrinth leading you on a spiritual journey.
Okay, I'm getting a sense of how this sacred geometry thing works in practice. Now, what about Madurai? How does it fit into all of this?
Madurai is like stepping into a giant cosmic diagram. The city is designed as a mandala.
Whoa, back up a sec. Mandala, like those colorful circular designs you see in art books.
Yeah, those are mandalas too, but the concept goes deeper. Think of a mandala as a visual representation of the universe. And in Madurai, the entire city is laid out like one giant mandala with the Meenakshi Amman temple at its heart.
I've heard of that temple. Isn't it massive with those towering gateways?
You're talking about the gopurams. They're like massive exclamation points marking the cardinal points.
Gotcha.
The whole temple complex is designed as concentric squares, symbolizing the cosmic order, with those gopurams drawing your eye upwards toward the heavens.
So it's like you're not just visiting a temple, you're stepping into a cosmic diagram.
It is, and it's meant to evoke this sense of awe, to connect you to something larger than yourself.
Amazing. Okay, last but not least, we've got Ujjain. What's the sacred geometry story there?
Ujjain is where spirituality and science meet. It's a major pilgrimage site, but it was also a hub for ancient Indian astronomy. In fact, it sits on the prime meridian of their astronomical system.
Wait, are you saying they planned a whole city based on star charts? That's mind-blowing.
It really is. They had a deep understanding of celestial movements and used that knowledge to design Ujjain.
And at the heart of it all is the Mahakaleshwar Jyotirlinga temple, right?
Exactly. One of the 12 sacred Jyotirlinga shrines dedicated to Shiva.
So it's like they saw astronomy as part of their religious practice, not something separate.
It seems that way. For them, studying the stars wasn't just about science. It was a way to deepen their understanding of the divine.
Wow. That's such a different way of looking at the world than how we're used to, It makes you think.
It does, doesn't it? There's something beautiful about that sense of interconnectedness.
I agree. So we've got 3 cities, each designed with sacred geometry, but each with its own unique flavor. Varanasi is about the river, Madurai is a cosmic diagram, and Ujjain blends spirituality and astronomy.
It's incredible, isn't it, how they took these abstract principles and made them concrete, literally?
But these cities weren't just frozen in time, right? They evolved, they changed, and they faced challenges. What happened after their initial sacred blueprint phase?
Well, remember all those power struggles we've talked about with empires rising and falling? Those left their mark on these cities, too. Temples weren't just places of worship, you know. They were often symbols of power.
Right. Makes sense. Control the sacred space, control the people, right? It's like how kings and emperors throughout history built those gigantic palaces and monuments to show off their power.
Exactly. And those power struggles sometimes led to destruction or repurposing of sacred sites. Like invaders might target temples specifically because they represented their enemy's power.
So these cities weren't just static snapshots. They were constantly changing as history unfolded.
Exactly. They were like living organisms adapting to a sometimes very chaotic environment.
It makes me think about how the source material mentions a Mughal emperor, Aurangzeb, and his impact on temple architecture.
Ah, yes, Aurangzeb. A fascinating but complex figure.
What was his deal? Was he just not into architecture?
Well, it's not that he wasn't into architecture, it's that he had different priorities. Earlier Mughal emperors, like Shah Jahan, were all about those grand projects.
Shah Jahan, the Taj Mahal guy, right. Talk about going all out.
Exactly. But Aurangzeb, he was much more focused on practicality and consolidating power. You see that reflected in the architectural style of the time.
So less Taj Mahal, more like government buildings. What about temples? Did he just stop building them?
Not entirely, but the style definitely changed. They started using cheaper materials, and the overall design became simpler, less ornate.
Ah, I see. A reflection of the changing times, both politically and economically. Less about showing off wealth and more about getting things done. Pragmatism.
Exactly. And there's another interesting twist. Remember how we talked about certain architectural features being reserved for the ruler, like symbols of royal authority?
Yeah, those were the VIP design elements.
Right. But under Aurangzeb, those royal motifs started showing up on non-imperial buildings, too.
Interesting. So was he, like, losing control or something?
Not necessarily. Some historians see it as a sign that he was actually delegating more authority, taking a more decentralized approach.
So not a loss of control, but a different way of wielding it.
Yeah.
Interesting. Did this trend of spreading the royal design love continue after him?
It did, actually. It even continued after his death, as the Mughal Empire declined and regional powers rose up.
So the architectural landscape gets more fragmented, reflecting those shifting power dynamics. Fascinating.
It is. And it's a reminder that the story of these temple towns is about both continuity and change. It's about those grand visions, but also about the reality of power, conflict, and adaptation.
Yeah, like they say, life finds a way. But in this case, it's architecture finding a way, adapting to the ever-changing world around it. So we've seen how these cities evolved, both in their physical design and in the way they reflect power dynamics. It makes me wonder, how did those shifts affect the spiritual experience of these cities? Did they lose some of their sacredness as they changed?
That's a great question. And it takes us right to the heart of how people lived and experienced their faith within these evolving landscapes. But, you know, it's really amazing how, even with all this change, you see that enduring human impulse to create beauty and meaning, even in the face of destruction.
That's a good point. It's a testament to the power of those ancient beliefs and how they continue to shape people's lives even as the world around them shifted. But let's zoom back in a bit. We talked about those grand architectural features and the rulers behind them. But what about the everyday folks, the people who actually lived in these cities? What was their experience like?
That's a great point. It's easy to get caught up in the stories of kings and emperors, but the real heart of these cities was the people.
So let's shift gears and explore that side of things. Let's step into the shoes of an everyday resident of one of these temple towns. What would their life have been like, surrounded by all this sacred geometry and spiritual energy?
Well, for one thing, their lives would have been deeply intertwined with the rhythms of the temple. Daily rituals, festivals, processions. These events weren't just religious obligations, they were social gatherings, cultural experiences, and ways to connect with their community.
So the temple was like the central hub of their lives, not just a place to go on special occasions. But these cities were more than just religious centers, right? People had jobs, families, their daily routines.
Absolutely. There were bustling marketplaces, workshops with artisans crafting everything from textiles to pottery, families gathering in courtyards.
So it wasn't all incense and chanting. There was that vibrant, down-to-earth energy, too.
Ah.
Did their homes and neighborhoods reflect those same principles of sacred geometry?
In many ways, yes. The idea of bringing the sacred into the everyday was important. Many homes were designed with inner courtyards, often with a tulsi plant, considered sacred in Hinduism, right in the center.
So, like their own mini temples.
Exactly. It was a way to bring that sense of peace and connection to nature right into their homes.
I like it. What about streets and public spaces?
Definitely. The layout of streets often followed a grid pattern, symbolizing order and balance. And many cities incorporated water features like tanks and fountains, not just for practical purposes, but also for their spiritual significance.
Right. Water is such a powerful symbol across so many cultures, representing purification and life.
Exactly. They were creating a holistic environment, a place where the spiritual and the everyday were intertwined.
It makes you wonder if we could learn something from that today. I mean, our modern cities can feel so chaotic, so disconnected from nature.
Absolutely. There's a growing movement toward what's called biophilic design, incorporating elements of nature into buildings and public spaces.
Like what? Give me some examples.
Think green roofs, vertical gardens, parks integrated into the city itself. It's about bringing those natural elements into the urban landscape to create a more harmonious, human-centered environment.
So it's not just about aesthetics, it's about rethinking the way we design our cities to prioritize well-being.
Exactly. And studies have shown that exposure to nature can actually reduce stress, improve mood, and even boost creativity.
So maybe those ancient builders were onto something. They intuitively understood the importance of that connection.
It's very
It's
possible.
like they were saying, hey, concrete jungle is cool and all, but let's not forget about the trees and the water. But how did they balance that connection to nature with the practical realities of city life? These cities were bustling centers of trade, right?
They were, and they had to find ways to accommodate those needs while still maintaining that sense of sacredness. They were really good at spatial planning, creating zones for different activities, incorporating markets and workshops, making sure there were spaces for both work and leisure.
So it was about creating a diverse and vibrant urban ecosystem, just like in nature itself. But we can't forget about the challenges these cities faced. We've talked about power struggles and invasions, but what about everyday life for the average resident? What were some of the difficulties they faced?
Well, like any densely populated urban center, they would have dealt with things like sanitation, disease outbreaks, and social inequality. And those problems could get even worse during times of war or famine.
So even in these sacred cities, life wasn't always a walk in the park. But it makes me wonder how those ancient principles of sacred geometry and spirituality might have helped them cope with those hardships. Did they offer any solace or guidance?
That's a really interesting question. And it gets to the heart of how these cities function, not just as physical spaces, but as spiritual anchors.
So it's like those design principles weren't just about aesthetics. They were about providing a framework for navigating the complexities of life, both the good and the bad.
Exactly. And it's a reminder that even amidst chaos and uncertainty, people seek out meaning, connection, and a sense of belonging. And these temple towns, with their rich history, spirituality, and culture, they offered a powerful testament to that very human need. It's amazing how they didn't just build these cities with a spiritual intention. They actually designed them to reflect that worldview in every detail.
Totally. It's like they were saying, we're not just going to throw up some houses and roads here. We're going to create a space that's aligned with the cosmos itself. But I'm curious, how would the average person living there experience that on a daily basis? Would they just be walking around feeling like they were living in a giant cosmic diagram?
Well, imagine this. You wake up in your home, and it's got a courtyard designed to channel positive energy. Then you walk down the street, and the layout is all about balance and order. Every corner you turn, there's meaning and symbolism.
Okay, I'm starting to see the picture. It's not just understanding the concept of sacred geometry. It's about how that would have been experienced on a day-to-day level.
Right. And those experiences would be reinforced through the rituals, festivals, and stories that were passed down.
Right. Because beliefs aren't just like abstract ideas. They're embedded in culture, in the stories people tell each other and how they make sense of the world. I wonder, what kind of stories would they have been telling in these temple towns? Were they all about gods and goddesses, or were there more, down-to-earth tales too?
Oh, it would have been a mix of both. Definitely epic myths about the creation of the universe, battles between gods and demons, legendary heroes, but also stories about everyday people, their struggles, their triumphs, love, loss, the search for meaning.
So those stories help them connect their own lives to those grand cosmic narratives. They found the meaning in the everyday.
Exactly. And those stories weren't just for entertainment either. They were a way to pass down values, to teach lessons, and to reinforce social norms.
Okay, makes sense. But let's get specific. We know the idea of karma was central to Hinduism and Buddhism. How did that belief actually shape the way people live their lives in these temple towns?
Karma, to put it simply, is the idea that actions have consequences. Think of it like a cosmic boomerang. What you put out into the world comes back to you.
So it's not just about avoiding doing bad things. It's about actively cultivating good actions. But how did that play out in their everyday lives? Did they have like a karma checklist?
Not a checklist exactly, but they had a very strong ethical framework that informed their decisions. Things like honesty, compassion, nonviolence, respect for all living beings. Those were highly valued. And these weren't just like abstract ideals. They were woven into the fabric of society.
So it wasn't just about personal gain or like getting ahead. It was about contributing to the well-being of the community and the world around them. That's pretty powerful.
It really is. And you can see it reflected in the design of these cities, too. There's an emphasis on community spaces, shared resources, and that connection between the human and the divine.
It's like they were saying, hey, let's not just build nice cities, let's build a more just and harmonious society too. Makes you think, have we lost something in our modern world with all the focus on individualism and competition?
It's a good question. I think there's a lot we could learn from these ancient cultures about the importance of community, compassion, and living in harmony with nature.
Speaking of nature, we talked about how these temple towns were often built near rivers or other natural features. What was their view of nature itself? Was it just a resource to be exploited, or did they have a deeper connection to it?
Nature was deeply revered in ancient India. They saw it as a manifestation of the divine, a source of beauty, abundance, and spiritual power.
So it wasn't just about using nature for their own needs. It was about respecting it, honoring it, even worshiping it. Did they have any specific rituals or practices related to nature?
Absolutely. They had elaborate rituals for everything from planting crops to harvesting rain. Trees were considered sacred, rivers were worshipped as goddesses, and mountains were seen as the abode of the gods.
Wow. So they really integrated that reverence for nature into their daily lives. Did that influence the way they actually designed their cities?
For sure. They incorporated trees, gardens, and open spaces into their urban fabric, creating a sense of harmony between the built environment and the natural world.
Like they were saying, hey, let's not forget about the beauty and power of nature, even while we're building these impressive cities.
Exactly. And it wasn't just about aesthetics either. They understood the practical benefits of incorporating nature into the city. Trees provide shade, water features help regulate temperature, and open spaces offer areas for recreation and social gatherings.
So it was a win-win. Good for the environment and good for the people. It shows that we don't always have to choose between nature and progress. We can create cities that are functional and sustainable. Cities that honor our connection to the natural world.
Couldn't agree more. It's about finding that balance, that harmonious relationship between human needs and the needs of the planet.
Speaking of balance,
Yeah.
one thing that's really striking me about these temple towns is how they integrated so many different aspects of life. The spiritual, the practical, the artistic, the social. It's like they were creating these holistic environments where every part of the human experience had its place.
That's a great observation. It really highlights how these cities weren't just designed for efficiency or productivity. They were designed for human flourishing, for a life that was rich in meaning, connection, and beauty.
It's like they understood that a truly good life isn't just about material wealth or personal achievement, but about something more profound, something that connects you to something bigger than yourself.
Exactly. And that's something we can all learn from today. As we design our cities and communities, maybe we can draw some inspiration from these ancient cultures. What did they know about living a good life?
So it's not about copying their exact designs or beliefs, but learning from their wisdom, their values, taking inspiration from their vision of a world where the human and the divine are intertwined.
Exactly. It's about rediscovering that sense of interconnectedness, that awareness that we're all part of something larger than ourselves, something that transcends our individual lives and connects us to the rhythms of the cosmos.
And that is a really powerful idea to carry with us as we navigate all the complexities of life in the 21st century. But let's bring it back down to earth for a second. We talked about how pilgrimage played a big role in these cities, bringing in people from all walks of life. I'm curious, how did that diversity actually play out within the cities themselves? Were they these melting pots of different cultures and beliefs, or were there strict social hierarchies?
That's a really interesting question, and it highlights how complex social life really was in these temple towns. Even though religion was front and center, these cities weren't just one big, homogeneous blob.
So even though they were built around this idea of shared spiritual beliefs, there was still room for diversity.
Oh, absolutely. Remember, India has always been incredibly diverse in terms of religions and traditions. Even within Hinduism itself, there are tons of different sects, schools of thought, and regional variations.
So it's like those spiritual principles provided a kind of overarching framework, but within that framework, there was space for individual and community expression.
Exactly. That diversity was shown up everywhere. From the specific gods they worshipped, to the rituals they performed, to the languages spoken in different neighborhoods.
So those cities were like microcosms of Indian society as a whole, all those layers of complexity and richness. Did that diversity ever lead to any friction or conflict?
Well, like any society, there would have been some tensions and disagreements. But for the most part, these cities were known for being tolerant and inclusive, with folks from different backgrounds living and working together.
So maybe those shared spiritual principles that focus on interconnection and compassion actually help to create a sense of unity amidst all that diversity.
That's a great point. It reminds us that religion doesn't always have to be a source of division. It can be a powerful force for bringing people together, for building a shared sense of identity and purpose.
It makes me think about the world today, with all the conflict and division we see. Maybe we could learn something from these ancient cultures about how to build bridges across those differences, how to create more harmonious societies. But let's not get too idealistic here. We know these cities weren't utopias. They had poverty, crime, social inequality.
Of course. Like any city, they had to deal with the challenges of managing a diverse and growing population, making sure people's basic needs were met, and maintaining order and justice.
So even with those spiritual principles guiding them, they still had to deal with the messiness of human nature and the complications of social life.
Exactly. It's a reminder that even the best intentions and designs can't completely eliminate those challenges that come with people living together in close proximity.
It makes me think about how those problems were handled. Did they have systems in place to help the less fortunate, to resolve conflicts, to make sure there was at least some degree of social justice?
They did. They had systems of charity, networks of community support, and ways to resolve disputes through legal means. And these systems were often rooted in their spiritual beliefs, emphasizing compassion, fairness, and the importance of a moral order.
So it wasn't just about individual piety or personal salvation. It was about building a society that actually reflected those values, even when things got tough.
Yes. It was about integrating those principles into every part of life, from personal relationships to political structures.
That's a powerful idea. It's like those spiritual beliefs weren't just these vague concepts. They were practical tools. Tools for dealing with the difficulties of social life and working towards a more just and compassionate world.
Exactly. It reminds us that even thousands of years ago, people were wrestling with many of the same questions we face today. How do we create societies that are fair, sustainable, and fulfilling for everyone?
So it's not about idealizing the past or pretending everything was perfect back then. It's about recognizing that we can learn from their wisdom and their mistakes as we try to build a better future for ourselves.
I completely agree. History isn't just a bunch of old facts. It can teach us, inspire us, and help us as we navigate this complex, always changing world.
Speaking of inspiration, one thing that I find really fascinating about these temple towns is their connection to art, music, and dance. It seems like those weren't just forms of entertainment, they were really integrated into their spirituality and way of life.
That's a great observation. In ancient India, they didn't really see art as something separate from spirituality. Art was a way to express the divine, to connect with the sacred through beauty and creativity.
So it wasn't just about making things that looked nice, it was about using art to elevate the human spirit, to move beyond the ordinary, to connect with something bigger than themselves.
Exactly. And that artistic sensibility would have been everywhere. The intricate carvings on their temples, the vibrant colors of their clothing, the graceful movements of their dances.
Okay, paint me a picture here. Imagine we're walking through one of these temple towns. What are we seeing, hearing, feeling?
As you approach the temple, you'd hear the chants and drums, smell the incense in the air. You'd see all sorts of people coming to offer their prayers and make offerings.
All right, I'm already feeling a sense of awe. What else?
Then, as you enter the temple, you're surrounded by these incredibly detailed sculptures and carvings. They depict scenes from mythology, epic battles between gods and demons, stories of saints and sages. The walls are covered with murals, and the air is filled with the scent of flowers and sandalwood.
It sounds like a sensory overload in the best way possible. And it wasn't just visual art, right? What about the music and dance?
Oh, music and dance were essential parts of the temple rituals and festivals. They would have these elaborate ceremonies with chanting, drumming, and dancers, all meant to create a sense of wonder and connection to the divine.
It's like they created a multi-sensory experience of the sacred, engaging the mind, body, and spirit all at once.
Yes. And it wasn't limited to the temples either. The whole city was alive with art. Street performers, musicians, storytellers, poets, all contributing to this rich cultural landscape.
So art wasn't just something you went to a museum or a concert hall to see. It was woven into every aspect of life.
That's right. It was a way to celebrate life, to express faith, to connect with each other and with the world around them.
It makes me wonder about the role of art in our own lives. Do we still see it as a way to connect with something bigger than ourselves, or has it become more about entertainment and personal expression?
It's an interesting question. We could talk about that for hours, but I think it's safe to say that art still has the power to move us, to inspire us, to make us question the way we see the world.
Absolutely. Maybe by reconnecting art and spirituality, we can find more meaning and purpose in our lives.
It's definitely worth exploring, and it shows us that even though these cultures might feel very far away, there are truths and experiences that connect us across time and space.
Speaking of connections, one thing that keeps coming up for me as we look at these temple towns is this idea of interconnectedness. They saw everything as woven together, the human and the divine, the natural world and the cosmos.
That's a really key insight. It's at the very core of their worldview.
But how did they actually live that interconnectedness? How did it shape their actions, their relationships, their whole understanding of the world?
That's a great question, and it takes us right to the heart of their ethics, their social structures, and their relationship with nature.
So it's about understanding not just what they believed, but how those beliefs played out in the everyday details of life.
Exactly. And it's through those lived experiences that we can really appreciate just how deep and complex these temple towns were. They weren't just historical relics, they were vibrant expressions of the human spirit.
And it makes me wonder, as we deal with the challenges of the 21st century, are there lessons we can take from these cities, from how they integrated spirituality, community, and nature into their lives?
That's a huge question, and one that I think we'll keep uncovering as we go deeper into these fascinating cities.
It's been a mind-blowing journey so far, and I can't wait to see where we go next.
Me too. Keep exploring. You know, it's really impressive how seamlessly those ancient cities brought together spirituality, practicality, and artistry.
I know, it's kind of mind-blowing. Our modern cities feel so, I don't know, flat in comparison. Like we've lost that sense of wonder, that connection to something bigger than ourselves.
Yeah, there's some truth to that. But hey, the good news is that we can learn from those ancient cultures. We can rediscover some of that wisdom.
I like the sound of that. So what are some lessons we can actually take from these temple towns and use in our lives, in our communities?
Well, for one, we can think about how they wove nature into their cityscapes. We were talking about biophilic design earlier, incorporating those natural elements into our buildings and public spaces.
Right, like green roofs, those vertical gardens.
Yeah.
But is that really more than just a trendy look? Does it actually make a difference?
Oh, it's way more than just looks. There's a bunch of research that shows being around nature can have a huge impact on how we feel. Less stress, better mood, more creativity. It even helps us heal. It's like we're literally wired to connect with nature.
So those ancient builders were onto something. They understood that we're not separate from nature, we're a part of it.
Exactly. It's like we forgot that somewhere along the way as we were busy building our concrete jungles, but we can get that connection back. We can bring more plants into our homes, push for more parks and green spaces in our cities, even just make an effort to spend more time outdoors.
I'm feeling inspired already. What else can we take away from these temple towns?
Another big one is the power of community. These cities weren't just a bunch of individuals living next to each other. They were tight-knit communities where people supported one another and celebrated their shared culture and beliefs.
I keep thinking about those ghats in Varanasi, the steps down to the river. It wasn't just a place to bathe. It was a place to hang out, to connect with your neighbors,
Yeah.
to just be together. I don't think we really have spaces like that in our modern cities, do we?
Not quite the same, no. Our public spaces often feel more transactional. You get in, you get out. It's not about lingering and connecting with people. But we can change that. We can create more community gardens, public art that brings people together, streets that are friendly to pedestrians so people can actually slow down, interact, and build those relationships.
It's like we need to bring some of that magic and wonder back into our cities, something that draws people together.
Yes. And that sense of wonder can come from lots of places. Art, music, storytelling, rituals, even just designing spaces where people feel safe and welcome.
I love that. Creating spaces that nourish our souls, not just our bodies. Let's be real. We can't just snap our fingers and transform our cities overnight. There are budget issues, politics, and all sorts of obstacles.
Oh, definitely. But I think the biggest hurdle is our own way of thinking. We're so used to seeing cities as just functional, all about business and getting things done. We've forgotten that they can also be beautiful, meaningful, and spiritually connected.
So we need a shift in perspective. We need to remember that cities aren't just concrete and steel. They're living, breathing places full of people, stories, and dreams.
Well said. And once we change how we see things, we can start to imagine different possibilities. We can ask ourselves, what kind of cities do we want to live in? What kind of world do we want to create?
And maybe, just maybe, looking back at these ancient cultures and their wisdom can give us some clues as we build a future that's fairer, more sustainable, more in tune with the rhythms of life.
Couldn't agree more. The past isn't just a bunch of dates and names. It's a source of knowledge, inspiration, and guidance for dealing with the present and shaping the future.
That's a beautiful way to put it. So, to all our listeners out there, as you navigate your own cities, your own communities, take a moment to connect with something larger than yourselves. Think about what you can learn from the past. And until next time, keep exploring.
Keep exploring.